Our next guest made national headlines during the COVID pandemic when he refused to enforce Arizona's stay-at-home order and is currently running for Senate on a pro-Second Amendment and tough on immigration platform as a Republican in Arizona. He's a fierce advocate for law enforcement, a passion that he and I share. But on some other issues, we may not see eye to eye. My old friend, Sheriff Mark Lamb from Pinal County, Arizona, joins us. Sir, it is good to see you. A long time.
Good to see you, Dan. I love everything you're doing. Appreciate all you do for law enforcement, too. I appreciate it.
Let's start with that, right? Let's start with something we agree on. Police, sheriff's departments across the country still suffering. Low morale, they're being underpaid, underappreciated, having trouble with recruiting. What can be done to try to help fix that?
Look, we've got to get back to where we support our law enforcement. You know, we have seen in political realms and in the media where they've really undermined the rule of law. And that has a negative impact on law enforcement, makes people not want to get into this profession. You know, the media shows things constantly, and you see it all the time, Dan, where they'll take a little snippet of a video and immediately portray us in the bad light. Look, I always tell people, we're not in the business of good optics, but the good men and women out there doing the job deserve to be treated a little bit better.
Totally agree. All right, now you say you're not one of these so-called constitutional sheriffs, right? And yet you spoke at the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association conference. Is it fair to say that in certain instances you believe as sheriff you can choose which laws to enforce and which ones to ignore?
Well, Dan, I do consider myself a constitutional sheriff. I swear an oath to the Constitution. You know, when I took an oath as an elected official, as do every other elected official, I swear an oath to the Constitution. You know, I don't know where that became a negative thing to stand up for the Constitution. If we go all the way back to Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court in 1803 ruled that the courts had the right to rule whether a law was good or bad, whether it was constitutional. And here's the trick bag that we get stuck in law enforcement. You have local authorities that will pass mandates, orders, laws, and then you'll have Congress or Senate that could be repugnant to the Constitution. And until a Supreme Court or a court rules on that, we as local law enforcement are faced with a decision that violates a Constitution but goes with the state law. Or do we side with the Constitution? And as a sheriff, I swear an oath to the Constitution, which we know as Americans, and you know as a lawyer, is the supreme law of the land. So I don't know how that has become a negative thing, but I do believe in the Constitution.
Well, I'll tell you how it became a negative thing, right? Is that the definition of what is a violation of the Constitution is something that belongs in the hands of the courts, right? Not law enforcement. Law enforcement is about enforcement of laws. And it sounds like you're saying, and other constitutional sheriffs say, that you should be able to decide what you think is constitutional and what is not. And if the highest court in the land hasn't ruled on it, your determination on what's constitutional should stand. Fair or not fair?
No, not fair, Dan, because here's the thing. As law enforcement, they pass a law. But the Constitution is also a law I'm expected to uphold. So you're saying to me that we're picking and choosing. We didn't put ourselves in that position as law enforcement officials. We were put in that position by legislators. And that's why we have three branches of government to hold each other in check and accountable. While a court may not have ruled on it, am I not supposed to figure out which law is more important to uphold? And in my book, the law of the land is always going to be the Constitution, and we have to side on that. And unfortunately, we in law enforcement get stuck in, like I said, a trick bag that we don't want to be in, that we don't put ourselves in. And look, COVID was a perfect example of that. You had local authorities passing mandates and orders that were not passed the way they should be as laws. And then we were sad to say, look, this is a violation of somebody's constitutional right. I cannot enforce this mandate or order like they want me to.
But the problem is that that's your interpretation of the Constitution, right? And that's the scary part, is that not just you, I just mean any sheriff wants to decide, I believe this is a violation of the Constitution, and as a result, I'm not going to enforce this. That to me is kind of scary. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.